So thank you so much. I actually want to start out by saying a big thank you, and thank you to Walter and everybody who's been involved with the Peter-Singer-Preis members. I know, Walter, you do this because you care so much. I knew that since I first met you, and you spoke so passionately about animal rights. And I'm very honored to be here. And I want to accept this prize on behalf of my team at Beyond Carnism, who is behind much of the work, all of the work actually, that I've been doing, and also on behalf of the team at Vortrag and Vivu, who has allowed us to do the kind of work that we can do here in Germany. And I also want to say, I have to try to pronounce this, alles Gute zum 30. Hochzeitstag zu meiner Schwiegereltern. Sie sind hier in Berlin für die erste Mal uns zu besuchen. So, das ist alle Deutsch für jetzt. Okay. So as I was putting together the presentation for this prize, I started thinking about my life and thinking about how my experience that brought me to Carnism, the work I'm doing, began. And I realized that there were some early warning signs of veganism, early symptoms that maybe I would turn into one of those vegans. Very, very early on in my life. My mother says that I was born old. She said I was a philosophical baby. But my father blames himself for my veganism. He thinks it's his fault that I turned into a vegan. My father was a fisherman, and today he is a professional fisherman, and this is me a really long time, well, you can't really see it, but a really long time ago at my father's boat. And I used to go fishing. I used to go on his boat with him regularly, and they would keep a little baby fishing pole for me hanging off the side of the boat. And I never caught anything because I didn't know what I was doing, but one day my fishing pole caught a fish. And my parents yelled for me, "You caught a fish, Melanie, come, run." And I came and I was pulling it in with their help, and we pulled the fish out of the water and threw the fish on the floor of the boat, and the fish was flopping back and forth, gasping for air, and I was only maybe 3 or 4 years old, and I remember feeling bad, and I didn't understand why, and I was so confused because my parents were so excited for me. But something felt really bad to me, and in my young mind, I couldn't process it. So my body made a decision for me that I didn't understand until many years later. After that day, every time I tried to eat fish or smelled fish, I got sick. And so from the age of about 4 years old, I never ate fish or any sea animals again. It was the first food group that I eliminated from my life. And of course I had a dog. Many of you know my story about me and my dog, who I loved like a family member. But my vegan journey didn't become so clear until 1989 when I got sick eating a hamburger. Many of you know my story, with really bad bacteria, and there I was again. Except this time, it wasn't only fish, it was all meat and eggs, and then very shortly thereafter, dairy. And so, of course, I became curious about my new diet, and I started learning about animal agriculture, and what I learned shocked me and horrified me. But what shocked me perhaps even more was that everybody I talked to told me, like, they didn't want to hear what I had to say. They would say, "Don't tell me this, you'll ruin my meal," or they'd call me a crazy vegan hippie propagandist. And I was really horrified. Again, it's the story of my life. It turns out it's the story of vomit. So this was like what happened when I had my vegan paradigm shift, right? It's like Tatiana was saying, I didn't see different things. I saw the same thing differently. And what happened was, instead of seeing or not seeing anything wrong in the world, or thinking that the things that I was seeing were normal, I realized that I was living in the midst of a collective insanity. To me, it was insanity. And I had to understand. I always thought of myself as a rational person, and I wanted to understand how it was that people who were rational could be so irrational when it came to their treatment of animals. People who cared so much about certain animals and other humans could turn away when it came to so many other lives. So as you know, I started studying the psychology of meat. I had to understand what was going on. And this research, of course, led me to my work on Carnism, the invisible ideology, which conditions people to eat certain animals. And after I did my research on Carnism, I thought, aha, I understand now. I understand not everything, but I feel like I understand a little bit of the DNA of oppression. These are the psychological mechanisms that allow us to harm other animals, and that allow us to harm other humans, and that allow us to harm ourselves. The same psychology that causes us to treat our partner badly or to carry out genocides against other humans are the psychological mechanisms that allow us to eat animals. And so I thought I had some good information that would help change the world, because that's what I always wanted to do. I wanted to change the world for the better. I wanted to reduce the suffering. But then I realized that what I had was a lot of theory. I had no idea how to turn my ideas into action. And especially at that time, I wanted action, and I wanted it now. I didn't want to wait. I knew what was happening to the animals. I felt it and I thought about it all the time. And I knew the animals didn't have time for me to sit down and do more studying and figure out how to somehow use this theory. So I wrote another book, Strategic Action for Animals. I did more research. I expanded my research on the psychology of eating animals to research on social change. How could we most effectively and most quickly change the world for animals and change the world for the better? I wrote Strategic Action for Animals because I had been an animal rights activist for a pretty long time, and I saw the passion of animal rights activists. I saw the commitment. I have never in my life seen the level of commitment and the level of caring that I see in the people who are working for a better world for animals. And I wanted to help these people, you, to do what they were doing, what they were working so hard to do, and help them to do it as effectively as possible. But then, as luck would have it, my publisher said to me, Chapter 7 of Strategic Action for Animals doesn't work. You have to cut it out. And I said, I have to cut out Chapter 7, but Chapter 7 is about Carnism, the psychology of eating animals. And he said, yeah, there's no place for that in this book. So my friend said, well, that's because you're supposed to write another book, Melanie. And so Chapter 7 became Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows. It became my book about Carnism. Now, many of you in this room are familiar with Carnism, and I'm not going to repeat too much of what you already know, but just as a quick overview. Carnism it's a dominant ideology. It's institutionalized, so it becomes internalized. We learn to look at the world through the lens of Carnism. And of course, Carnism is violent, and it's against our core human values, and this is what gives me hope. This is what keeps me going, is the hope that I have. I know, and I have seen this again and again, people care. People care about animals, people care about justice, and people care about the truth. And Carnism depends on our not caring, and the entire system is organized around deception. So Carnism needs to use these defense mechanisms that keep the ideology alive. The ideology creates this set of myths that distort our perceptions, that block our feelings, that enable our behaviors. so that we keep eating animals without ever interrupting the carnistic consciousness that we were born into. Now, in my later work, I started really thinking about, how do we best destabilize carnism? What is the best way to weaken the system? And I realized that carnism, like other oppressive systems, in my opinion, actually needs to do two things to keep itself alive. I call this carnism's two-pronged strategy. It needs to strengthen carnism, and what else? Weaken veganism, right? Carnism depends on maintaining this imbalance of power. And the way that it does it is by using two types of defenses. It uses primary defenses that weaken, strengthen carnism. Primary defenses teach us to believe in a set of myths about eating animals, that eating animals is the right thing to do. Secondary defenses exist to weaken veganism or invalidate veganism. They teach us a set of myths that make us believe that not eating animals is what? The wrong thing to do, right? So just like we learn primary defenses, eating animals is normal, natural, and necessary, carnism teaches us that not eating animals is what? Abnormal, unnatural, and unnecessary. Carnism is structured to invalidate veganism, to keep veganism weak. Because veganism, the vegan movement, is the single greatest challenge to the power of the carnistic system. And of course, we've heard these myths before. Another quick example of a primary defense is that carnism teaches us to see farmed animals as abstractions. We learn to believe that they have no individuality. They have no personality of their own. A pig is a pig, and all pigs are the same. Now, carnism's secondary defenses there are many secondary defenses, and I'll give you an example of one, which is a defense that seeks to invalidate not just veganism, but vegans. Vegans are stereotyped. Vegans are seen in a way, it's a form of, do you say this in German, shoot the messenger? Shoot the messenger. If you shoot the messenger, you don't have to take seriously the implications of their message. Carnism is structured to make people not believe vegans. And it's interesting and ironic because vegans are sharing information that is in the best interest of everybody else. So, for example, we learn carnism teaches us to see vegans as the vegan tofu-loving, tree-hugging hippie. There's the stereotype of the vegan extremist, which is interesting, right? Because it's not extreme to drink the milk of another species when you're an adult, and to do so in an incredibly violent way. It's only extreme when you try to raise awareness of how extreme carnism is. Or maybe you've heard the stereotype of the hysterical vegan. How many of you have been told that you're too sensitive? Like almost everybody in this room, right? Or you're overly emotional, sentimental when it comes to animals. But really, think about this. If we are too emotional, what does that mean? We're not, what?
Numb.
We're not numb, that's true. But if somebody is too emotional, by definition, they're not rational. This stereotype is designed to make people believe that the vegan message is not rational. Somebody who's not rational is not worth listening to. It is a way of silencing vegans and hiding the vegan message. And of course, this has been used to discredit members of other social justice movements. Feminists have been called hysterical. People in the United States who worked for the abolition of African slavery were called overly emotional sentimentalists. When it comes to eating animals, the world needs more emotion, not less. Feeling sad and emotional about what is happening to the animals is normal and healthy and appropriate, an appropriate way to feel. And sometimes vegans are stereotyped as the super vegan who never. Where are you, Nico? The super vegan's in the room. Do you ever get sick, Nico? You better not. How many of you have pretended that you're not sick because you don't want people to blame it on your diet? Right? The super vegan who's never allowed to get sick. But if the man next door has heart surgery, then he has bad genetics, right? So the super vegan who has to be perfect all the time. If you wear wool, you're a hypocrite. But if you don't, you're an extremist. So these are vegan stereotypes that have been projected onto us as a way to keep the power of the vegan movement down. But the good news is that they're not working. So after I wrote my book, Why We Love Dogs, which covered some of this information that I showed you there, I was giving a talk about Carnism one day at Farm Sanctuary, which is the leading farmed animal protection organization in the US. And the executive director said, how can we help you bring this talk as far as possible? So they gave a donation to me and said, use this money for a year to go around the United States and talk about Carnism. So I did. And all of a sudden, it turned into an international speaking tour. Not all of a sudden, but within about a year and a half, I started getting more and more and more invitations to speak. And the invitations became international, and all of a sudden I was speaking all over the world and also getting a lot of media attention. And what I discovered is that raising awareness of Carnism works. It's a backdoor in to the conversation, in a way. Many people have an idea in their mind about what veganism is already. A lot of people have an allergy to this word vegan. Oh, you're going to talk about veganism. You're going to tell me all the reasons I shouldn't eat animals. But Carnism was a new concept, and the psychology of eating animals was interesting, and it was working. So just for example, these are just a few of the hundreds and hundreds of comments that I've gotten after giving a Carnism presentation. Do you want to read them yourself, or should I read them out loud? Read them out loud? Yeah. Read them out loud, okay. The message got through to me, these are all from meat eaters, that we are really just under a sort of group pressure to eat meat. Now I have real doubts about ever eating meat again. This presentation was mind-blowing and life-changing. Life-changing, emotional, eloquent, and profoundly informative. This presentation was deeply moving. It opened my mind and heart to the issue of ethical eating and the invisibility of Carnism. Today will have a profound impact on my life. My life changed tonight. I cracked open. My heart cracked open. I'll never have a bite of animal flesh again. And so, thank you. And so, I share this with you because this is what inspires me. People really care. When we can reach people and help them open their hearts, miracles happen. When I was speaking in South Korea, my book is actually out in Korean. I was speaking in South Korea. I had no idea how people would respond to my Carnism presentation. You can imagine, it's a very different culture. And it was so interesting to me. All of my talks were packed. There was a long line of people waiting to get their books signed. And at the end of one of my talks, a young man, maybe 20 years old, left me a little note on the table. He had waited in line for like 45 minutes. And he wrote, "Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I hope too many Korean can feel many things from you. I ate meats, but I will reduce meats on my table. And finally, I don't eat meats anymore. I promise." Thank you very much, my dear Melanie. You're my mentor. And we have so many inspiring stories of this, of people whose hearts have just opened. So now we have 5 other speakers giving the Carnism presentation, and hopefully we'll be working to train more soon. And we've been able to give the Carnism. I've actually given talks now in 37 countries, 6 continents, 25 US states, and everywhere I go, I see the same thing. The world is changing. People, what I have learned in my journey is people are much more similar than they are different. I don't mean to minimize the work we have to do. We have a lot of work to do. There's a big problem there. And at the same time, people care. People care, and when they wake up, they are willing to change. And many, many people today are waking up. So over the course of time, my book started, as I was giving talks, there was more and more interest in my book, and it's now out in 12 languages. And when my book was published in German, I'll share this with you, it was an interesting story because this changed my life as well. I came to Germany, to Berlin, to give a Carnism presentation. And you recognize that man? Do you recognize this room? The first time I came to, this is my 3rd time here in this room. The first time I was in this room was giving a Carnism presentation about my talk, which is the reason I ended up moving to Germany, because that was also the first day. I had my first date with Sebastian here at Ascentus. And the next time I was in this room, it was to get married to Sebastian. We were here, right up there, getting married. So this room has special meaning for me. And I want to say a special thank you to you. This award belongs as much to you, of course, as it does to me. You are the best activist, the most effective activist I know, and you help me be a better activist and a better person. So eventually I formed my organization, Beyond Carnism, because it was too much for one person, and I'm not so good at administrative things. So, and I have my amazing team here from Beyond Carnism. Our goal, our mission is to expose and transform Carnism, and we really look at the work that we do as transforming all oppressions. It's not simply about eating animals or not eating animals, although that's where we focus. It's about our consciousness. How do we think? How do people think? How can we change the way people think or influence the way people think so they no longer think violently? So you might recall Carnism's 2-pronged strategy that I mentioned to strengthen Carnism and weaken veganism. Well, Beyond Carnism has a 2-pronged strategy as well. And what we do is we work to weaken Carnism and strengthen veganism. And so all of our campaigns are organized around this mission. We weaken Carnism by raising awareness of Carnism among meat eaters, largely. Now, Carnism awareness has been very useful in bringing about certain shifts. So, for example, it helps us to see that eating animals is not just a matter of personal ethics. It's the end result of an oppressive system. So it's a social justice issue. Carnism awareness helps create vegan allies. Vegan allies is the term I use for somebody who is not yet vegan, but who supports veganism and supports the vegans in their lives. Many people in this room may be vegan allies. Many people are already vegan, but I'm sure we have some vegan allies in this room too. Vegans, I believe that one of the problems in the vegan movement is that vegans believe that either you're vegan and you're part of the solution, or you're not vegan and you're part of what? The problem. What this does is it prevents 98% of the public from supporting our cause, and we need all the help we can get. So vegan allies, in my experience, have done more for the movement in some ways than certain vegans. I'll give you just a couple of examples. This was a press conference in Spain, in Madrid, after my book came out, for the release of my book in Spanish. And right before the press conference began, my colleagues took me aside and said, "Melanie, it's going to be difficult. In Spain, they still think you need to eat red meat or you're going to die." This was 5 minutes before the press conference. And I said, "Thank you. I don't know what to do with that, but now I'm nervous, but thank you." Okay. And it was true. It was the culture. This was maybe 4 years ago now. So we had a press conference, and all of these people, these are national and international Spanish media. They were very important media professionals. And after we talked about my book, the room was completely silent. And then the first reporter raised their hand, and she asked, "What can we do to help?" And the next day, all over the Spanish media, was eating animals is the inevitable result of an oppressive system. And there was a section in this, what you can do to change the problem. Become an active witness in the transformation of Carnism. And this went not just national, but international into South America. These are vegan allies. We together, some of you might have heard of the video that ProVeg, Vibu, and Beyond Carnism made about the cat restaurant. And this is, I'm going to share with you a newer video that's talking about what happened with that.
0.2 billion animals are slaughtered every week. At the same time, people keep millions of beloved pets. But why do we care for one animal and eat the other? To raise awareness of this double moral standard, we launched a restaurant, a special kind of restaurant. La Table, first ever restaurant serving cats.
My name is Maurice Bruno, I am from Switzerland and I'm a chef. Cooking is like art to me. As a kid, I always watched my grandmother cooking. She was always a huge influence for me. I want to reinvent my grandmother's recipe in another way. The Peter-Singer-Preis, which is the most tender part of the cat.
It's not real.
What made the story so believable? In Switzerland, you were actually allowed to eat your own pets. La Table appeared first in an online film. On their website, you could book your own table. The story provoked a media-wide earthquake. The web, international press, and even celebrities attacked the chef and his culinary ideas. And with media awareness reaching its peak, we reviewed the restaurant as a hoax.
The storm of outrage didn't have a long time coming, and today the Vegetarian Association literally let the cat out of the bag.
And this was the result.
La Table Suisse was a PR campaign that reached 10 million people on 4 continents.
And inspired an intense debate about the necessity of eating meat.
Now, this, thank you. This campaign was very, very difficult and very, very expensive. And the only reason we could do it was because one of the main PR companies here in Europe, in Germany, and one of the best production companies here donated their time to us. None of them were vegan, but all of them believed in the cause and all of them wanted to help us. These are vegan allies. If we had said to you, if we had said to them, well, forget it, you eat meat, we don't want your video help, we would never have been able to reach people the way we did. Carnism awareness also helps weaken carnistic defenses. When we talk about these defense mechanisms, they lose a lot of power. When I was giving my TED Talk, and it's now a video online, we continue to get more and more emails and comments from people who have seen the video, and I'm just going to share a few of them with you. This was an 18-minute video, and I really believe that part of the reason this works is because when you name the defenses, they lose a lot of their power. This person said, when I see the video, I didn't change anything, it's not perfect English. When I see the video, I cry. Thank you for opening my eyes that much. 20 minutes ago, I weren't sure that this is possible. You and your video changed my life. I just wanted to thank you. Since watching your TED Talk, I've gone vegan and have never felt so good. Keep doing what you're doing. You changed my life for the better. And people will often say, I've gone vegan or I'm going vegan, and thank you. Whoa, so powerful message here. I just cried all along. We'll be definitely vegan from now. And this is long, but it's really poignant. This person said, amazing video. I literally cried through this video from guilt and shame. This is obviously a meat eater. They're all meat eaters. Also, my 2 cats, whom I love, were lying at the end of my bed. And I thought, how can anyone consider making an animal suffer when they are so beautiful and innocent? My cats purring and making those closed-eyed, I love you look, made me decide that I can never have a hand in making an animal suffer again. Thank you dearly for speaking so logically and eloquently about a difficult topic. I have decided that being humane as a human is the best choice for me, that does not involve harming others that share our planet and help our planet. And this person said, I just cried watching this. I'm totally vegan now. So people's minds and hearts are opening. And when I talk about carnism and carnistic defenses to people, and this happens consistently, it's often on airplanes, because I spend a lot of my time on airplanes these days. It's so interesting. I will share my story and say, oh, I used to believe that eating animals was normal, natural, and necessary. But now I learned that these are myths. Or I say, when I was eating meat, I didn't make the connection. I just didn't think that's a dead animal. And people almost 100% of the time agree, and they understand. I do that too. I had one woman on an airplane recently say, I do the same thing. I said, well, what do you do? She said, I push it out of my mind. And I said, why? She said, because if I think about it, I can't eat it. And I said, well, why not? She said, well, because it's a dead animal. That's gross. And then she said, well, maybe that's your point, right? And carnism awareness helps us expose carnistic bias. We often think vegans are the ones who are biased because we don't recognize that we've been born into this biased system ourselves. So carnism awareness raising is one part of what we do, and we empower vegans. And we believe that empowering vegans is one of the most, maybe the most important things that we can be focusing on. Just one example. When you talk about veganism, how do people respond to you? If you say, hey, I'm vegan, what do they say?
Don't be cruel to me.
Yeah, oh, this is why you should be vegan. Oh, thank you for enlightening me. Me too. I'm never eating meat again. Or more like this, right? So because of this built-in carnistic defensiveness, people become vegan. It's not easy to be vegan in this world in some ways. It's empowering. Becoming vegan, in my opinion, is one of the most important things any of us can do, and promoting veganism is one of the most important things any of us can do. And at the same time, it's challenging. It's difficult to be a vegan living in a non-vegan world. We are a tiny minority still. Every day we walk out the door and we see things that deeply offend our most important values. Many of us have suffered from a post-traumatic response from seeing graphic videos. We actually have trauma from that. And yet, every day we have to see the results of this trauma. Dead animals' body parts everywhere we turn. As vegans, we spend our lives working, picking up the pieces of the mess created by others, and our efforts are often invisible and even ridiculed or mocked. It takes a tremendous amount of courage and compassion to be able to live our truth and speak our truth in a world that is fighting us to be just like everybody else. So we want to be empowering vegans, helping vegans to talk about the issue, because it's really hard to talk about veganism because Carnism has these built-in defenses. And we want to help vegans have more sustainable lives. So we created SIVA, the Center for Effective Vegan Advocacy. It's co-founded by myself and Tobias Lehnart. And what we do at SIVA is we have trainings. Tobias and I travel around the world and we train advocates. We train vegans in how to take care of themselves, to avoid burnout, how to communicate more effectively, how to think more strategically. And how to stay in this movement for the long haul. And most people have had a very positive, pretty much everybody's had a very positive response. People talk about having a change in their thoughts about how they share their vegan message. One person said this was the best thing that happened to the movement in South Africa. And the trainings are helping activists to feel better about themselves as people and not just as activists. And then one person said something that was a little disturbing to me in our feedback. After you've learned German very well, please learn French and come back to France. And I thought, okay, I'll do that. So, what's next for us? The work that we're doing at Beyond Carnism, the work that I'm doing. The next thing that we're about to launch is a new book that I've just finished. I'm sorry, I will be finished on Wednesday. I'm just about finished with. And this book is called Beyond Beliefs, a guide for vegans, vegetarians, and meat eaters in relationships. I wrote this, can you relate to, sometimes it's a little difficult? Just a little difficult. I wrote this book because I'm also a relationship coach. That's my other profession, before I started working too many full-time jobs in animal rights. Relationships, we have a lot of data now demonstrating that relationships, when we have connected, secure relationships, we fare better in all areas of our life. If we have strong relationships, we are healthier, we live longer. We are less likely to be depressed and have anxiety. We're less likely to develop heart disease, and we're more successful in our careers. Relationships, healthy relationships, are fundamental to everything else in our life. However, people who become vegan often discover that relationships become problematic. Can you relate? Just a little, right? So many times when we become vegan, our relationships start to break down. And so not only do we not have healthy relationships, but then we have problem relationships. It's my opinion, having met thousands of vegans around the world now, it's my opinion that relationship breakdown is taking so much energy out of the vegan movement. Imagine if every vegan had healthy, secure relationships that gave them energy and made them feel sustainable. Imagine if every vegan could communicate about veganism without doing this, which is what most of us want to do. How much better this would be for the movement. So I wrote this book to help vegans have healthier relationships, so that they could be happier, and also so that they could be more effective in the important work they're doing in the movement. So the future for Beyond Carnism and for me is to focus more on vegan support, on supporting the supporters, supporting the people who are doing the important work of changing the world. The animal rights movement, the vegan movement, is only as powerful as the vegans in the movement. And the vegans in the movement are pretty powerful. What's really exciting is the work that we are doing is effective. It is succeeding. I'm going to share with you some information that I have from my journey around the world to just show you some of what's happening around the world today. This was 2 years ago. This is Brazil. Brazil's Meatless Monday campaign is actively supported by Sao Paulo City and State. It's implemented in 3,000 schools. They serve 2 million meals per day. And the Department of Education now purchases 88 tons. That's 88,000 pounds less meat every month. This is Brazil, which is a meaty country. And this is the SVB, Brazilian Vegetarian Society, succeeded in getting foie gras. That translates, that's French, from being sold and consumed in the city of Sao Paulo. It's pretty amazing. I was in Kuwait about 2.5 years ago. And in 2014, Kuwait launched the first vegan organization in the country, the Kuwait Vegan Society. And I recently talked to them, and since then they have regular screenings. They're getting more and more restaurants to stock lots of vegan options. In Indonesia, 2 years ago, the Indonesian Vegetarian Society had 57 branches and 100,000 members. And the estimate was that there were actually 2 million vegetarians and vegans alone in Indonesia. I was in Australia when was I there? February? Thanks for I'm losing track. In February in Australia, I couldn't believe what I saw in Australia. They believe that and this is actually a reliable poll, an independent poll, 11.2% of Australians now identify as vegetarian. That is almost unheard of. When I was in Australia 3 years ago, it was like a different country. I couldn't believe how many new vegan restaurants there were. Everybody knows the word vegan. It was amazing to see the change there. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Green Hill campaign in Italy. Is anybody familiar with that? So in Italy, interestingly, in 2012, Italian activists broke into, it was a vivisection lab, a breeding facility to liberate beagles. It was probably the most successful, or one of the most successful open rescues in history. You guys know open rescues? An open rescue is when activists break in to rescue animals, but they do it openly. They don't hide themselves. What was amazing about this was that the media was on the activist side. The media spread the message all over the country. The public was cheering them in the streets. Thousands of Italians got involved in the Beagle Liberation campaign, and they also ended up opening up a conversation about veganism. And I'm going to show you a video from the BBC, a video clip of the liberation effort. And one of the things that my Italian colleagues told me was that the police didn't try to stop them. The reason they did this was because the police were also on their side. This was an amazing success. Sebastian and I were in, where were we? Where was that? Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. I'm losing track. In Malaysia for the 41st World Veg Fest in Kuala Lumpur, and that was in 2014. And it attracted about 1,000 delegates and 10,000 visitors. I was in Israel a few weeks ago. Israel is unbelievably vegan. We went for lunch, and it was a regular restaurant, like luncheon restaurant, where there's somebody behind the counter and you have to tell them what foods you want and they put it in a plate for you. And they have like 50 different things to choose from. One section is hot, one section is cold, one section is grains. And I asked the man behind the counter, I said, what's a vegan? They all know the word vegan. I said, what's vegan? And he went, this, and this are not vegan. I can't wait for the day when we label food C for Carnist. That's going to be amazing. So in Israel, in 2015, In 2015, 15,000 people participated in the March for the Animals. And this was one of the most amazing demonstrations to see. Wow. They just keep coming.
Kannst du ein bisschen was davon übersetzen? Can you translate some of that?
From Hebrew? After I learn French, I'll study Hebrew. And right here in Germany, which is one of the top 3 countries, in my opinion and in the opinion of many people in the movement, one of the top 3 countries for the vegan movement here. It's really amazing what's happening here in Germany. Just April 20th on CNN, they said that Berlin remains Europe's capital of vegan, with more exclusively vegan restaurants than any other city on the continent. So good job, guys. So really, I was given the Peter-Singer-Preis, but it doesn't belong to me any more than it belongs to you. Without you, there's no me. Without my team at Beyond Carnism, I can't do anything. This belongs to all of you. I have no doubt that veganism will replace Carnism one day as the dominant ideology. I have no doubt. It's very logical to me. The question is not whether, it's when. And I believe that people will look back on history, on this time in history, and see this as a barbaric and brutal time that we live in. And I know today that vegans are still seen as extremists, often. That's changing. The world is changing. And I also believe that when people read history books, vegans will not be looked back on as extremists. They'll be recognized as heroes. So I want to just end this presentation by thanking you for everything you do. You are the reason the world is changing. It's your courage, it's your commitment to live your truth in this crazy world we live in, despite all of the pressures and all of the sadness that we're aware of. And you keep going and you keep doing it, and you are changing the world. You're changing the world for animals. So thank you for being a part of this change, and thank you for helping make Carnism history. Thank you.